There's been a lot of debate these past few days about this article in R Today, and I'm gonna actually bring it up. So let me share my screen. I think we should start there by sharing my screen and reading the actual article for those of you who need to come up to speed and understand what's been going on. The subject of the article is our very own taking stock analyst, David Rose. And so you can imagine that this caught me very much off guard when I saw this article, I think at a Sunday evening or early yesterday morning, and then seeing, all the conversation that's been happening around it. So the very headline says listed companies suffer from David Rose's baneful kiss. And I'm like, okay, let's read the article. This article was posted on the website R Today. So it says, last week there was much consternation as NCB Financial Group's share price sank as low as 32 Jamaican dollars. It must have been unsettling for the management team, staff, and shareholders. The share price has fallen from a high of $210 in 2019, and for the best part of the last month has hovered in the $40 range. Then came a number of damning articles from Trinidad, which caused panic. Is Michael Leachin still able to maintain control of NCB? Is NCB in a position to raise 300 million US dollars on the international capital markets? Why is NCB in such turmoil? Plenty gloated, some gleefully awaited the coup de grace. Then came the news that NCB's share price had sunk to as low as $32 when it was hovering above $40 a few days ago. Some said it was a good time to buy, others said it could lead to a run on the bank and shake confidence in the country's largest financial institution. Remember, we discussed this on this very show last week with David as well. Jamaica Stock Exchange listed companies' fortunes are not as determined as other bourses are by historicals and other pertinent information. The volumes traded are invariably low, and activity is characterized as illiquid. It is easy for one person to come in and move the market substantially with individual trading activity. The liquidity of the JSE has long concerned former Group CEO of Grace Kennedy, Don Webby, and he sees it as a shortcoming of Caribbean exchanges. Liquidity is still a big issue for the JSE. The delisting of Grace Kennedy from the Barbados Stock Exchange has nothing to do with Barbados or its economy. It has more to do with the liquidity of the various exchanges in the Caribbean. For over 15 years now, I've been calling for one Caribbean stock exchange because I believe it can increase the market capitalization of all listed companies in the Caribbean. What we found in Barbados was the liquidity was very low, and it did not make sense to continue to list. And he goes on making that point about Caribbean Stock Exchange. Then the article continues, this year has not been a good one for Jamaican equities, and investors have been taking hits. It is heartening to see more young people looking to grow wealth via the stock market. It bodes well for the future. Now here we go, the subject of the article. With NCB under siege and detractors quick to talk about its vulnerabilities, the journalist David Rose decided to trade NCB stock and brought the price down with just 2 shares. His trading activity triggered the circuit breaker, which saw the stock plummet to $32. He traded a total of 60 shares, playing around with the equivalent 15 US dollars, and came out on the losing end. Taking to social media, they describe him as the currency determiner of millennials and Gen Zs, David Rose wrote after his trading in NCB shares. Now, I don't know that these two things are correlated. They are making a connection. A stone was flung with no target, yet a hug sealed. Actually, I won't read the rest of this. We're all spectators at this point because I don't know that these two things are actually correlated, that David was even referring to that when he made that particular tweet. And then they continue, who could David be talking about? Perhaps he was irked by his trading activity not yielding a fortune, but he could hardly have expected more than the cost of 2 KFC big deal meals. Perhaps David's trading activity and its impact on NCB's share price were merely a simple twist of fate. maybe he was unaware that he would be NCB's succubus. And then it goes on to make some allegations that David is the one who actually caused NCB's share price to plummet to $32. Now, let me say, I have spoken to David, not at length. David has informed me that he is consulting his attorneys at this point and taking advice. So he's not coming on the show tonight. He wasn't scheduled to be on the show tonight anyway, but he's not making a comment just yet, right? But there's a lot that has been said, and you guys can read the rest of the article for yourself if you are interested. But the main allegation is that there has been market manipulation, especially as it relates to NCB's share price. A lot of things are said in this article accusing David of being personally responsible for where NCB's share price is today. And it also goes so far as to make connections between David and the share price of other companies and other brokers, claiming that they have fallen victim to things that David has published about them. And it also goes so far as to say, as to reveal David's supposed trading history and getting into details as to how much he paid for shares, the accounts that he used, the number of shares that were purchased, and making a connection or a supposed connection between what was done and what his possible motivations were. And then the article raises some issues about journalism ethics, which is ironic given that this very article raises questions about journalism ethics itself, the publication of the details in this very article. And at first I had an initial reaction, which is quite similar to what I saw many people expressing online as well. And I had to take some time to think about it and reflect, which is what I typically do, rather than to just put out something and react out of frustration or anger or whatever the moment is telling me to say. So I did a little consultation as well. I've been monitoring the comments on social media, seeing what people are saying. I am pleased to see that the vast majority of people are lobbying around David and saying, how dare his personal trading information be revealed, and whether that was an ethical thing to do. I have since gotten some information, because that was one of my major concerns as well. How do you put somebody's personal information out there? How do you reveal private information, private trades by a private individual? How do you even come by this information as a media house? And I do understand that as a media house, as a journalist, you will get leaks. I have gotten information leaked to me many, many times in the past. I have even won awards on the basis of information that's been leaked. So how a media house comes about particular information is really neither here nor there. The impact of it, however, is something to be concerned about, and also thinking about the laws. So I'm not necessarily going to fault R Today for publishing the information, but I do question how they got this information and the ethics of the people who provided this information, because I was under the belief that such information, such trading history, ought to be confidential. And upon reading the article, it gives the impression that this information was revealed by the brokerage or brokerages with whom David holds the accounts, because I cannot see how that information would be publicly available. Now, an argument has been posited that indeed the shareholding of listed companies is public information. And so whatever shares I own is therefore public information. Whatever shares you own is therefore public information, because whoever owns companies, that is public information. But I have countered, well, if it's public, where do I go to find it? If it's supposed to be public, is there a website I can log into and see all the shareholders, every single shareholder of every single company on the stock exchange? I don't know that that is publicly available, even though technically it is supposed to be public information. It being public information legally is one thing, but it being publicly available and easily widely accessible is another thing. I don't know that that information, even though legally it ought to be public, so to speak, according to my sources, I don't know that it is easily and readily publicly available or accessible. And so therefore, I don't know that that information could be accessed by anybody at any time, which means that for our today to have gotten access to that information, it would have had to be leaked by somebody who has knowledge of that information, which I believe, and I don't know, I'm not an attorney, and perhaps an attorney can weigh in here, ought to have been confidential information. Now, like I said, I spoke to David briefly yesterday. David says he's tired today, he's had a long day. And I can completely understand that and understand his position of taking legal advice before putting out any statement. But I am concerned about the breach of trust between client and broker, especially in a post SSL era in which trust between client and broker is already perhaps at an all-time low, especially in an era where people are increasingly afraid of doing this type of business, of investing in stocks. Every single time, every single post I post on social media, somebody comments, so you saying Bolt getting money back yet? I'm not investing, I'm saving my money under my bed. So investor confidence has taken a severe hit in the past couple of days. And to have your personal information leaked to the media does nothing to help restore investor confidence. As a matter of fact, it does the opposite. It proves that my information is not safe. If you deem that I'm doing something that you're not happy with, you can just leak my information to the press. And so there is that aspect of it. What about all the data protection laws that we have been so keen to promote over the past couple of years? There's always some webinar or seminar about the brand new Data Protection Act and what institutions can do with client data and all of these things. And so what about that? Where does that come into play? Who can comment on that? Who are the data protection experts? Does a broker have an obligation to keep their clients' information private? Or is it, legally speaking, fair game for anybody's trades to be made public because, legally speaking or technically speaking, the ownership of public companies is public information? I'd love to know what you guys think about all of this. I hear my phone blowing up. Let me see if these are messages that I need to take. And I also want to read some of your comments as well. So, all right, so I'm getting a comment from somebody, and since you're watching the show, this person who sent me this WhatsApp, let me know if I can call your name. I don't know if you want me to. I won't unless you tell me to. But this person is somebody who works in the industry, who says shareholder actual trades aren't public, as you said. Top 100 shareholders at a month-end time period is available to persons that want to purchase, but actual trading info is private. And that's what I suspected. This would come from the JCSD, JSC, and what we call the registrar. And this info has to be requested directly from the exec of the listed company or corporate secretary. All right, which is what I suspected. Yes, the top 100 are available. You can go online and find them. But for individual trades, that info is still private. Somebody else is making the argument to me that it is public, that you can find it. I have been searching. I have not found a way where that is easily accessible to the public. This person who works at a brokerage and has extensive information in the field is saying that actually you would have to request it directly from the exec of the listed company or the corporate secretary. But reading that article, and like I said, you can go ahead and read it for yourself, because I don't want to get into any trouble repeating any of the things that were said about David. But it does give the impression that the brokers themselves, or broker, him or herself, revealed that information about these particular trades. And so, what do you think about this information being public or private? Should it be publicly available? Should it be private? And then there's a bunch of other issues as well, but let me start taking some of your comments, because the comment section is blowing up, and this is what we said we were going to do. I said that this was going to be a conversation between myself and you guys. All right, let's see, lots of comments here. All right, so Ryan says, lots of people lose off of David Rose. Journalists need to disclose any interest they have in the stocks they are writing about. Troyan says, first thing is to define manipulation. Manipulating stock prices, buying stocks at a higher or lower price is not a bad thing. They do it in the US all the time. Pink Stoicism says, while Stoicism says learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference, that's Marcus Aurelius, what happened this week requires strong, swift action from several persons. Which several persons? I would think the FSC would be one that needs to be involved. And then the data protection authorities, whoever is in charge there. Shell says, people expect journalists to report on investment, but not do their own investments. And I saw that here. Shell said they will have to ban journalists from investing altogether. Investing is a private issue. They shouldn't need to disclose how they are investing. Now, one thing David has always said is that he invests in every company on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. He has said that repeatedly, that he is an investor. He doesn't hide the fact that he's an investor, and he always says he invests in every single company. And so from the time that he's reporting on it, you ought to know that he invests in that company, because he invests in every single company on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. But what level of disclosure is appropriate? The allegation here, and I saw some other allegations from he who shall not be named on Twitter as well, making the case or claiming that, and let me try to choose my words very wisely here, that things that David has done have had a direct impact on happenings that he then reported on, without making it known that it was his action that caused the thing that he was then later reporting on. And so I feel like, yes, there is an obligation to disclose when your direct actions result in the story, when your actions become the story. So yes, I do think that there is an obligation to disclose in that matter, and let me tell you, journalists becoming part of the story themselves is not unheard of. It happens. It is a different style of journalism. I have done it before, reported on things that I was directly involved in. But yes, the disclosure in that instance becomes important. So if indeed it was David's very actions that triggered the circuit breakup and caused NCB stock price to $32, and if that is something that he knowingly did and then later reported on it, I do think that he would have had a responsibility to disclose that, to say, I was the one who did this, and look how easy it was, even if it was just to prove a point, just to say, I deliberately did this action to prove a point that it can be done, and to prove how easy it is to manipulate stocks on the market. If indeed that is what he did, then I believe that he should have disclosed that. He should have said it and made that point in his article, that this is what I did, this was the effect, and this proves XYZ point, and the authorities need to fix this issue, or whatever it is that he was trying to prove. I don't know for a fact that that is something that he did intentionally. I don't know for a fact that he was even aware that his two trades, as the article alleges, are what triggered the circuit breaker or what caused NCB stock price to fall to $32. What I can say is that NCB's stock price has been falling for the past 5, 6 years, since 2019, since that high of $210 before COVID. And two trades by one journalist are not responsible for that demise or that extreme crash in NCB's share price over the course of the past 6 years. And so to blame one person for what has happened to NCB stock, given all the other circumstances over the past 6 years, I think is disingenuous and unfair. Well, let me take some more comments before I continue. So who else do we have? LBW says, all that's needed is a comment at the end of all financial articles. This writer invests in equity and could be a shareholder in the company. Why? Supervillain says, David is disingenuous. Okay, we already read that one. Ryan says, David should have said in his article that he was the one who halted down the stock. If he was aware that it was him who did it, I would agree with you. But there is a possibility that he wasn't aware that he did it, but he didn't know that it was his trade that caused the stock to halt. LBW says, Don Webber used to complain that GK share prices do not properly reflect the results of the company. Shells wants to know, how do they know it is David that traded it? Did he post it on social media? No, he did not post it on social media. And so, yes, that becomes one of the questions. How did they know? This information clearly was leaked, apparently was leaked, and that brings into question the ethics of the broker-client relationship. LBW says, I've seen many shares halt up and down with as little as selling small amounts of shares. And that's an issue. So Don Webby in the article was complaining about, the number of shares, the liquidity of trading, the liquidity of stocks on certain markets. He was referring to the Barbados Stock Exchange, but it happens here on the Jamaica Stock Exchange as well. It's very, very small trades. And we've spoken about it on this show, because we look at volumes traded and we can see sometimes that very, very small quantities can have a tremendous impact both ways, by the way. So today we're talking about, did what David do result in this stock coming down to $32? But we have seen this happen the other way as well. So if you want to talk about market manipulation, let's talk about it the other way as well. Because we have seen some instances where there are some stocks, and I'm not going to call any names, that have been trading way higher than where they're supposed to be trading. And why is that? Nobody wants to talk about insider trading, but it happens every single day on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. There are people with insider knowledge who make certain trades with the information they have, and there are no consequences. And there's no way to track it, to monitor it, even though technically there's supposed to be laws against it. It happens every single day. There are some instances that come immediately to mind where you say, how come all of a sudden this stock price gone up by X amount? And then a few days later, you hear an announcement about what this company is doing. And you're like, oh, okay, somebody had some information. But nobody wants to talk about that. When it comes to David, you want to make him the scapegoat. Okay, I get it. Venja says, the issue isn't that he's doing his own investments, it's him doing it at the expense of people and their money or livelihood. 11 Coco Investor says, this type of essay written by a journalist, if you may call him that, is definitely intimidation. In the end, talking about how it's a warning, trying to destroy the bright young man's future. Rob says, the key to market manipulation is intent. So what was the intent? behind these things? What was the intent behind halting NCB shares or stock price to $32? What is the intent behind inflating certain stocks prices? What is the intent? Making a few people rich? Or in this case, what is it? What would have been the intent behind bringing NCB's price to $32? What is the implied intention? Just to hurt NCB's reputation? It's already been hurt. 6 years this has been going on. NCB stock price did not go from $210 to $32 overnight. It was not the result of two simple trades. That happened over 6 years. Think Stoicism says, I would like to know if the Data Protection Act doesn't work in the investment arena. I'm very concerned. Someone from the JSC needs to speak publicly. It does apply to the investment arena. I've been to enough of these seminars and workshops. I've even hosted a couple of them to know that once you have client data, that the Data Protection Act applies. And so, yes, we need to hear from these authorities about this, what appears to be a breach. I can only assume because David hasn't said so publicly yet. Ian says, good night from Toronto. Rob says, if my investment strategy is for a stock to fall, I will do so using the tools at hand. That includes triggering a circuit breaker. And then this also brings to light the other issue that I've seen people commenting on the past couple of days. We still don't have short selling. So what's the intention behind purposefully bringing a stock price down when you can't even really benefit from it in that way? Short selling has been promised since at least 2019 as well. That's when I really started covering the market seriously. And around that time is when I heard the promise, and it still has not been introduced. And perhaps it is because the market is so easy to manipulate, as has been proven. Well, let me not say proven because I don't know that it was manipulation, but the market is so volatile or so easy to move. And perhaps that's why they haven't introduced short selling, because the liquidity on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, the volumes traded are not enough. And two simple trades can hypothetically result in what we have seen the past couple of days. 11 Coco said, David alone trading 2 shares bought NCB to $30 from $240. That is laughable. LBW says, the problem is a market that's not used to someone who does in-depth investigations and comes to conclusions. Rob says, if 2 stocks result in a stock price falling to the ground, the problem is clearly the stock market. Pink Stoicism says, writing an article does not a journalist make. People need to remember that. The article was terrible and raises concerns. Are you referring to the Hour Today article or one of David's articles? I assume you're referring to the Hour Today article. Venja says, I'm glad there was some accountability because he thought that no one would find out. Assuming that what you've read is true, Venja. Ryan says, so wait, you get leaks and question the ethics of people who give leaks? So I'm not sure. All right. The things that I've gotten leaks about in the past have not been on the business side. This has been in my pre-business reporting career, right? It has been on a lot of corruption, and some may argue that this is corruption. It has been on things that have to do with even national security. And so no, so I would say that when a journalist gets a leak, right, The journalist has to question whether it is in the greater good or the public interest to report on the information that they have reported. Now, I don't necessarily fault the journalist for doing their job once they are able to verify the information that has been provided to them, which sometimes can be difficult because it's confidential information. But at the same time, yes, you may still question the ethics of the person who provided the leak, especially in the environment that we are in. Now, you as a journalist, you're going to run with it because that's your job, right? But you may still side eye the person who gave you the information because sometimes it comes from within the very camp that is, we do a lot of, I used to cover politics a lot, and you would get leaks from within the very camp of the person they are leaking the information about. And yeah, yes, you do side eye them. You'd be like, really no, but that's y'all's business, that's y'all's concern. You guys fight that out amongst yourselves. But yeah, you do sometimes look side eye at whoever provided that information to you. In this instance, it makes you question an entire system. So a political leak, I don't know that it's comparable to this, because a political leak, who does that harm? It harms, them within the party who is doing the infighting, for example, as opposed to a leak of this nature, where yes, it harms the person whose information was leaked, but it potentially also harms the entire system, because now we all are left to wonder, well, does that mean that our data is at risk of being leaked? Anybody can just put out our data. Is it really publicly available, as some are now alleging? So I don't know that the two things are comparable. So if you wonder why I'm taking my time, I have to read through these comments before I actually read them live, because I don't want to get into any trouble on this show. Roswell says, look, heavy trades went through, bring down NCBFG to where it is. That's more than $29 million. That's not a regular trade. David's journalism doesn't have much to do with that bearish move. What I can tell you is that David has made some powerful enemies. That much is obvious based on some of the people who have been weighing in as well. There are some powers that be who are rather disgruntled, but our good friend is taking his legal advice as he should, staying out of the spotlight for a few days, and we'll see, what happens next. Humble Boss says, this article is just targeting a regular retail investor. I know that David is a regular retail investor. He's a retail investor. I wouldn't call him regular. Where the big boys with them cash to support a stock price from tanking, in my opinion, picking on a journalist is a low blow that need to get dealt with. Rob says, you can only pay for the top 100 as far as I know. Pink Stoicism says, my shares cannot be public information. And Rob, yes, the hottest part is the specific times noted about his trade. Seriously. Yeah, so there were very specific details. And so the implication that this is public information, I don't know that there is evidence to support that. LBW says the trade details are sent to all brokers, and the businessman said he gets the trades of his company daily. Okay. Lanesra says it's public to the higher powers. Venja says, I understand Khalila's position. David is close to her team, but seeing your share price drop further due to intentional manipulation is truly upsetting to a lot of people. How do you know there was intentional manipulation? Intentional being the key word here. No disrespect to journalists, but David is a very bright young man who can provide a lot more to Jamaica than be an argument with some 60-year-old Englishman. I didn't even realize the time. Wow, Time is going. Okay, we need to move to our next segment. But let me take a few more comments before we move on to the next segment. Craners, what is being alleged is manipulation, which is very, very easy for a single trader to do in Jamaica, but one share each day driving the price to your desired low, then buy bulk at the new low. Natoya says, I was of the impression that only top 10 shareholders are required to be listed publicly. DK says, all who think their shareholdings are private have learned a valuable lesson. Cleaning Tricks says, if the top is listed, the top 100 and can and should be listed. Rob says, one share trade, cannot move a company's stock price. The price is determined by volume in addition to the prices those volumes traded at. So I'm trying to read some of the comments read them in my mind before I read them publicly. Good question, Cleaning. Would the reaction be the same if it was manipulated to the highest price for the year? Great question. Because there have been stocks whose prices have been manipulated to higher prices. In my opinion, I'm not calling any name. I don't have the proof. I only have suspicions. Tavares says, thousands of people are investing and never read the associated laws involved with investing. Chairman says, whether he intentionally manipulated stock or not, if I were David, I would be looking for a new broker. David has several brokers, by the way, so which one it was, I don't even know. Roswell says, persons can sell off a stock as low as they want to, even if JSE wants to cancel those trades, no different from block trade when a company can get steep discount and we can't. And David, 11 Coco has your back. He says, you set up the GoFundMe, we will contribute, get a good lawyer. Kish says, individual trades should be private. So yeah, the article raises a lot of issues and a lot of things that we as shareholders need clarity on, as shareholders and investors need clarity on, including one, the relationship between broker and their obligations as it relates to protecting client information. Two, should all trades be public information? Should all company ownership be public information? Is it already? And if so, where is this publicly available? Three, what is the role of the Data Protection Act and the Data Protection Officer in a case like this? And you can see your whole question there, but this has been a topic for the entire show so far. How do you feel about your trading history being public? I'm not even going to give you the options because we've been discussing it for the past 45 minutes thereabouts. How do you feel about this entire situation? But yeah, like I said, there are serious questions that need to be asked. I feel like the JSE should put out a statement about this. I feel like the FSC should put out a statement about this. I feel like the Data Protection Officer, the Office of Data Protection Commissioner, I don't even remember how that is framed, that they should have an interest in this case as well and ought to say something, because it does raise serious concerns about protecting client data and whether we even have a right to such privacy. What are our expectations? Are we asking too much that our individual trades not be subject to public scrutiny? Is that a fair ask? Is that even a legal request? I feel like some clarity needs to be provided by the authorities that be as it relates to this particular situation.